Welcome back. You're watching News 12. I'm Scott McGee. Now, the murder of George Floyd sparked protest across the country and here in the Hudson Valley. And on the one-year anniversary of his death, News 12's Michelle Brown caught up with a local activist who is still demanding justice.
Black Lives Matter!
A year after a march through the village led by George Floyd's cousin.
No justice! No peace!
And a candlelight vigil organized by the Spring Valley NAACP Young Adult Committee.
This is more important than school.
A reflection on racial reckoning following George Floyd's death at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. Calvin Demetrius is a member of the Spring Valley NAACP Young Adult Committee, but he's sharing his own views, not the organization's, on what changes, if any, have occurred since George Floyd's death.
For us, I can't honestly say that there has been any major change.
Companies like Aunt Jemima have changed their logos to avoid racial stereotypes. And NASCAR no longer allows Confederate flags at races. A good start, says Demetrius, but not nearly enough.
They're great gestures, but at the end of the day, that's all they are.
No peace!
What he'd like to see is a permanent change as a result of the death of George Floyd.
We had actual legislation for the changing of policing. That would change things forever.
President Biden had hoped to bring about that systematic change on the first anniversary of Floyd's death with the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act.
Legislation to tackle systemic misconduct in police departments.
An optimistic deadline that's not going to happen. The legislation passed the House last year, but it's still being negotiated in the Senate. As Congress stalls, a young Rockland activist and millions across the country wait for a permanent solution to what they see as deep-rooted injustice. Michelle Brown, News 12.
Now, one of the key sticking points in the proposed George Floyd justice in policing legislation is reportedly whether to end qualified immunity, which shields officers from lawsuits and civil liability.